Is the Motorola Moto E 2020 worth buying in 2022? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Hi everyone, this is Kevin here, and this is the Moto E 2020. Now, as the name suggests, this phone was launched in June of 2020, so at this point, it's about a year and a half old. Now, despite that, this phone is still very popular at the various prepaid carriers. And in the US, we have actually not gotten a successor to this phone. So there is no Moto E 2021, for example, and I have not heard anything about there being a Moto E 2022. Now, it certainly is possible. I can't predict the future, so we'll have to see what happens. But it does seem like for the very low-end Motorola devices in the US, they have been incorporating those into the G series. So for example, Motorola recently launched the Moto G Pure in the US, and that phone kind of seems like a successor to the Moto E 2020 in a sense, because it is very entry level. But again, at least as far as the Moto E series goes in the US, this is still the newest phone that they've launched. Now, internationally, that's a little bit different. They have the Moto E7, for example, and some other phones as well in the Moto E series that I haven't really been keeping up with too much, since on this channel, I tend to focus on the prepaid carriers here in the US. But essentially, this phone is still very relevant, despite it being pretty old and relatively outdated. So I figured it would make sense to create this video to kind of look back on this phone to see if it's still a worthy option at this point in 2022. Now with the Moto E 2020, we're getting a 6.2-inch display, and this display is an IPS LCD display. And actually, for a very entry-level device, I think the quality overall looks really good. The display gets pretty bright. Things do look decently crisp and clear here, despite the display being 720p. And viewing angles are not too bad as well. Now, of course, compared to a $1,000 smartphone, this phone is nowhere near that level in any category for that matter. But for a very low-end budget phone, I feel like we're getting some pretty decent quality here. Now, the PPI is 271. We're getting a 19:9 aspect ratio, and we're getting a 78.4% screen-to-body ratio. So in general, we do have a thicker bottom bezel. We also have a water drop notch that features the 5-megapixel front-facing camera, but the phone still does have a pretty modern-looking and practicality-minded design. And you can see, looking at the display on the phone, viewing angles are not too bad. Again, for a very low-end device, you can't ask for too much. And colors are not too bad either, so for watching video content or looking at photos or even browsing social media, this phone will get the job done. Now, it's not the most powerful phone out there, which we will talk about a little bit later on in the video, but as far as the display quality goes, I'm pretty happy with it. Now, with this device, we're getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage, and there's also microSD card expansion, which can allow you to offload photos and videos, for example. So I definitely appreciate having microSD card expansion, and I definitely recommend getting a microSD card because nowadays, 32 gigs of internal storage really won't get you too far. Now with the Moto E 2020, there is no wireless charging, and there's also no face unlock, but we do at least have a fingerprint sensor on the back of the phone. And it's decently fast and responsive, and in general, I have no complaints with it. So definitely something to keep in mind there. And also on the back of the phone is the dual camera setup. So we're getting a 13-megapixel main camera and a 2-megapixel depth sensing camera that does assist with portrait mode. And I do appreciate that despite the Moto E 2020 being a very low-end device, we do have portrait mode for both the rear and front cameras. So here's how things look through the main camera on the back of the phone. Then from here, we can easily switch over to portrait mode to get those nice blurred out backgrounds. And then of course, you can do the same thing with the front-facing camera as well. So pretty nice there. Also, going over to the other camera options, we have, as I showed you a second ago, portrait mode. There's also cutout, spot color, panorama, and live filter. And then for video, we have slow motion and time lapse. Now this device does support 1080p video recording for both the front and rear cameras, which is something that I do definitely appreciate. So if you are looking to take some videos with this phone, the quality definitely won't be the best out there ever, but at least it will get the job done. Now with the Moto E 2020, we're getting 2 gigabytes of RAM and the Qualcomm Snapdragon 632 processor. Now 2 gigs of RAM is not very much at all. So doing any tasks that would require quite a bit of RAM, certainly won't work out very well here with the phone, but the Qualcomm Snapdragon 632 processor is actually not too bad for a low-end phone like this one. And I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test with the device, and I'll show you the scores from that test right now. But essentially, I got a single-core score of 230 and a multi-core score of 787. So what I recommend doing is running this test in your current phone and then compare your scores to these scores to get a better idea of whether or not the Moto E 2020 will even be a performance upgrade for you. Because of course, these numbers don't really mean anything unless you're comparing them against another device. Now with the Moto E 2020, we're getting a 3,550 milliamp hour internal battery, which is pretty decent, so expect to get a full day of battery life out of the phone. But one thing this phone does not have is NFC. So if you do like to make mobile contactless payments, which I know is becoming more and more popular all the time, then just know that you can't do that here with the Moto E 2020. Another thing that this phone has that's pretty interesting and something that we really don't see at all anymore is a micro USB port on the bottom of the device. So there is no USB-C here with the Moto E 2020. In fact, I think it's one of the last phones that I even have in my inventory here in my studio that even has micro USB. So I suppose at this point, it's kind of an end of an era. But taking a closer look at the hardware of the phone, I already talked quite a bit about the front panel here, but again, in general, the display is pretty decent relative to other lower-end Android devices. The phone is made completely out of plastic, besides the front panel, which is made out of glass. Taking a look at the left side of the phone, we have the slot for the micro SD card and SIM card. Then on the right side of the phone, we have the power button, volume down and volume up. Then up top here, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack and noise-canceling microphone. And then on the bottom of the phone, I already mentioned the micro USB port for charging and data transfer, but we also have the microphone and we have the speaker. And then on the back side of the phone, we have this glossy finish that does pick up some fingerprints. We have the camera module and fingerprint sensor. So in general, I think it's a pretty decent looking phone, especially for a lower end device like this one. And for basic tasks like phone calls, text messages, light web browsing, and light social media, the Moto E 2020 will certainly get the job done for you. But if you are looking to do anything advanced, or if you're someone who spends quite a bit of time on your smartphone on a day-to-day basis, then I probably would avoid getting this device because you certainly will notice the various hardware limitations that we do have with it. But this is the Moto E 2020 in 2022. I hope you found this video to be helpful and informative, and if so, give the video a thumbs up, sub to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and have a great rest of your day.